Alter Ego Comics Fanzine, issue number 97, October of 2010. The Halloween non-EC pre-code horror comics issue. Greetings, friends. Today we're looking at issue number 97 of Alter Ego Comics Fanzine from Roy Thomas and Company. This is a particularly great issue, and it was yet another issue that I used when I was researching my documentary Haunted Thrills, because it is packed with great info on non-EC pre-code horror comics. As you can see on the cover by Bill Everett, it's the Mighty Zombie cover from Menace number 5, the pre-code horror comic book. On the inside cover, of course, various issues of Alter Ego you can purchase or download with the digital edition. Contents page with a hilarious little splash piece here by Myron Foss. Of course, Myron Foss, the infamous publisher of Eerie publications in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. It's the classic. If you can't see that, Myron Foss is the artist. He's drawing these creatures. And of course, the creatures are actually alive, and they come through the door, and they're attacking him. And he's like, "No, no, you're not real. I only drew you from my imagination. Go away." Ah! And here we go with the crux of the biscuit right here, folks. The Other Guys, a gargoyle's eye view of the non-EC horror comics of the 1950s by Lawrence Watt Evans. And this guy is correct. He asked the question on top, had all the horror comics of the 1950s been published by EC? Hell no. Okay, but a lot of people were under that assumption. And probably for a while, at least in my youth, I was under that assumption. So he starts it back, at the beginning. He's talking about the frightful 40s. It wasn't until 1947 when the first quote-unquote complete horror comic book was published, and that was Avon with Eerie number 1. But he does give us a background because there were horror stories in some issues of the 1940s Golden Age comic books. There just simply wasn't a comic book that was completely horror. Great covers here from Suspense Comics. Of course, they do mention Classic Comics number 26, adaptation of Frankenstein. Excellent cover of Mask Comics by none other than L.B. Cole. And here is the January 1947 issue from Avon, Eerie Comics number 1, which was basically a one-shot, but it was the first comic book to contain all horror stories. And then, of course, later, Eerie would come back in 1951 with Eerie number 1 again. And that was just full-blown horror. For some reason, people have it in their heads that EC was even the first. Not by a long shot. American Comics Group's Adventures into the Unknown, way before EC. This is the fall of 1948 with Adventures into the Unknown number 1. You also had Stan Lee on the scene before EC with Marvel Tales. And of course, in that weird transition period when superheroes were going out, as you can see here, they had a couple of issues of Captain America's Weird Tales before they completely dropped Captain America and began with the massive Atlas pre-code horror lineup. And they would prove to be the biggest, with well over 1,000 different issues published in the pre-code horror realm. EC, Crypt of Terror, before it became Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and Haunt of Fear. This is just all Atlas, folks. All Stan Lee as editor at the Empire State Building. If you want to hear more about Atlas and a couple of the artists that drew for Atlas at that time, namely Joe Sinnott and Vic Carabata, watch my documentary Haunted Thrills. It's on my YouTube channel where I interview both Joe Sinnott and Vic Carabata in what would be probably their last interviews before they sadly passed away a few years ago. And there it is. There is the Bill Everett cover from Menace number 5, of course, which is the cover. And here's American Comics Group. They really do a great job of covering almost all of the other pre-code horror comic publishers. Ziff Davis, you have Ace Comics, which had titles such as The Beyond. Black Magic, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby did a ton of work on that pre-code comic. Harvey, Harvey was huge. Tomb of Terror, Witch's Tales, Chamber of Chills, Black Cat Mystery. Avon. Avon had some of the great artists, of course, Everett Raymond Kinsler. I had the fortune of interviewing Everett Raymond Kinsler in New York shortly before he passed away at the age of 96. And he did some fantastic work for Avon Comics. Very short amount of time spent in the comics biz because Kinsler was doing a lot of Avon book covers and illustrations for pulp magazines. Before that, he became quite the famous portrait artist, doing portraits of presidents and celebrities for many, many years. Some of my personal favorites right here, folks. Stanley Morse. There's no doubt about that. Mr. Mystery, Weird Mysteries, Weird Chills, Weird Tales of the Future. All Stanley Morse. A ton of Bernard Bailey covers. There was also Fawcett and This Magazine is Haunted, which later was sold to Charlton, and they carried on the title, This Magazine is Haunted. More top-notch, top-quality comics from Fiction House with some amazing artists, including Maurice Whitman. Some more on Charlton, of course, Steve Ditko. Early Steve Ditko, this is way before Spider-Man. For example, this one, The Library of Horror, from The Thing comic book, issue number 12, October of 1953. Star Publications, L.B. Cole, with all those fabulous L.B. Cole covers and really cool and quirky J. Disbrow art on the inside. Feral, Haunted Thrills, Voodoo, Fantastic Fears, Strange Fantasies, fantastic pre-code stuff. And the covers were hilarious, often very funny stuff, like the skeleton is judging a beauty contest. The Screaming Skull, art by Harry Harrison, who would become a famous science fiction author. Of course, Stainless Steel Rat, Make Room, etc. Another great artist, Matt Fox, who did a few covers for Chilling Tales. Then there's St. John, coming in with titles like Weird Horrors. They got Standard Comics with Out of the Shadows, The Unseen. Then you had Comic Media that put out titles like Horrific and Terrific. And there's a classic cover for Horrific by Don Heck, Hangman's Horror. Love it. Trojan, which put out Beware, which had some great covers. And then, of course, there were the one-shots like Tormented and Horror from the Tomb. And then they talk about Frederick Wortham and the end of the pre-code era and the implementation of the Comics Code. The 1950s come undead as horror icons rise from the grave as stamps and stamped postcards. To have all the EC comic book covers that apparently were made into stamps. Back in 2010, public outcry halts release of horror stamps. And these stamps were all destroyed before they were officially released by the post office. And then, how to obtain a refund for the first day of issue postmark orders. Editor's note at the very bottom at the end. Okay. So it was all just an early April Fool's joke. Give us a break. And this is such a great article. The Hand of Doom. A gripping interview with the two-fisted model for numerous comic book covers. So they interview this hand, which is apparently the hand that appears in all of these various comic book covers. Nice humorous piece from Alter Ego. No issue would be complete without Mr. Monster, Mr. Monster's Comic Crypt by Michael T. Gilbert. Oh yes. Clowns. Everybody hates them. Ever wonder why? Then turn the page and learn the terrible truth behind clowns effing clowns. Clowns in comics, folks. Killer clowns. Bozo gone bad. That is hilarious. Casey, crime photographer. A clown holding a gun on him. Captain Marvel beating the crap out of a clown. An article by Mark Swayze. Really cool cover for Flyin' Jenny. The cover was drawn by none other than Good Girl art master Matt Baker. And the back page featuring the Stanley Universe book and Carmen Infantino, as well as the thin black line, all about the life and career of comics' most controversial inker, Vince Colletta. And there you have it, folks. A good look at a fantastic Halloween issue of Alter Ego on the non-EC pre-code horror comics of the 1950s. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please like and subscribe. Thank you.